Welcome back to the PCC Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about the 3 different types of metabolic downregulation that you might have. Now, this is really critical to understand what steps you need to take when it comes to healing your metabolism and seeing lasting fat loss. And I think the most important thing to consider whenever I am, say, drafting an outline for a podcast that I want to be valuable for you all is I'm thinking about what is the end outcome that we want to achieve. And it's almost the exact same across the board for every woman that I talk to, for everyone that we come across. We want to lose weight and not worry about it anymore. We want to lose weight and no longer have that be the thing in the back of our head that is eating away at our bandwidth, our emotional energy. We want to lose the weight and no longer feel like we have to spend 3, 4, 5 outfit changes trying to just feel comfortable in what we're wearing. And the secret to permanent success, there's a lot of mindset changes, identity shifts, transformations up here that we have to work on. However, there is a tactical component. It's not quite as simple as just changing your mindset because your body can change without your mindset changing, and your mindset can change without your body changing. And so what we want is for those things to happen in unison. So a bulk of our content, our messaging, our podcasts are all mindset related, or it's sprinkled in there. But today I'm going to give you a little bit more of the tactical of what are these 3 kinds of metabolic downregulation that I've been able to identify through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reps of working with clients, talking with prospective clients, and really just being in the trenches, understanding what are the patterns of behavior that lead us to certain outcomes and how do these kind of correlate with one another into subgroups, because not every case is the same. And I'll kind of explain why I had to group these into 3 groups later in this episode, because there are consequences to approaching things the same way across the board if you have different kinds of metabolic downregulation. And I've seen that sadly in practice, but it's something that now I've developed a system to avoid in the future. So that is really what this is all about. So this episode is really for you. If you have already listened to some episodes talking about you might have metabolic downregulation, you might have a slower metabolism now because not just because you're in your 30s or your 40s, but because you have been dieting your entire adult life and sometimes teen life. For me, it was teen life into adult life. And your metabolism is adapted, it's downregulated, and it knows what's coming. So we have to change things up here. So this is not for you if you have no idea what that is. I would suggest going back an episode, maybe back a couple episodes, and just look for anything surrounding metabolism. And I explain it quite clearly there. And I would kind of do that research, then come back to this because this is the next stepping stone for you. And I'll, you know what, just to make it easy, I will link some of those episodes that explain metabolic downregulation in the show notes for you. So with that all being said, let's get into what these 3 subtypes are. I'm not going to explain what metabolic downregulation is because at this point you should know roughly what that is, right? Metabolism is downregulated from years and years and years of dieting, cardio, and under eating. So the 3 types are I've kind of personified all 3 of them. So they are in an archetype of each. So number 1 is the guesser. Number 2 is the weekend warrior. And number 3 is the A player. And so we have to understand which category we mostly fall into. And now this is a little bit of a spectrum. There's kind of, I would say, if you imagine a triangle and each archetype is at a corner of the triangle. Is that a corner? Yeah, it's a corner of a triangle. And that is where you can kind of identify yourself. You're probably going to be somewhere within the triangle. There are very few people that are like smack dab in the middle, but you might veer more towards like, oh, I see myself in the guesser and the weekend warrior. I see myself more in the weekend warrior and the A player. There's going to be characteristics that overlap. It's not a black and white, I'm only this, I'm only that sort of scale. but it is important for you to understand that you can probably lean more towards one than the other. And right now, as I'm recording this, I'm in the process of developing a quiz that will help you better identify where you fall in that triangle, where you fall in that scale of like how many quote unquote points do you have for each of the types, so you can really know what the best approach is moving forward. But that's all in development because this is relatively new in terms of how I've figured this out, and I'm excited to share. So let's get into it. Number one is the guesser. Signs that this is you is that you eat really healthy overall. You feel like when you go grocery shopping, you avoid fried foods, frozen foods, soda, packaged foods. You feel like your overall diet's really solid. You rarely overindulge. So it's really confusing as to why you're not making progress. And you've also really cut back on your sweets consumption, and you don't eat that much. And maybe you don't even like have a taste for those things. Like you're just like, whatever, I don't need the extra cookie or whatnot. And you've probably also taken recommendations from trainers and from people online about getting active, increasing protein intake, doing the basics, but nothing seems to be happening, right? And so you're kind of always unsure if you're doing enough. And then lastly, you could definitely be the type of person that saves a lot of your workouts on TikTok, Instagram, and you have kind of like a folder, an album of recipes. And maybe you can even get around a gym fine, but you're just really unsure of what workouts would be best for you and your goals, which makes you really second guess, like if anything you're doing is effective at all. And it's not getting you anywhere, or it feels like it's not getting you anywhere, and it just feels aimless. Some people have described it as throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that it sticks. It never sticks. So you might also have a long history of trying different diets. Like you may have done the more restrictive, like calorie counting, keto, Noom, MyFitnessPal, 1200 calorie diet, whatever. But at this point, you're so exhausted and burnt out by it that you're just trying to like lose fat while being mindful, because apparently now that's a thing. And you're like, I'm not going to go like all in at the moment, but I'm just doing my best and just nothing is happening. And now I'm frustrated, right? So that would be the guesser. If that sounds like you would probably want to count how many times you were like, yeah, that was me. And that's probably an indicator that you're falling more into that category. Now, what's really happening with the guesser is that what used to work, and specifying that what used to work, aka just making a couple changes like switching out your carbs for salads or saying no to the fries or stopping having those extra couple drinks, that used to be enough, but it's not working anymore because your metabolism has adapted to that approach. So you need a more specific approach to be able to get your metabolism to respond. And second, all the second guessing, all the uncertainty, it just eats away at your mentality, and it makes it hard for you to be consistent enough to follow through with one proven approach to see how it works. So these people we often find fall into the category of what we call program hoppers, which I'm going from thing to thing to thing, 6 weeks challenge to 12-week challenge to this program to that app to this thing, is really like what these people tend to do. And that doesn't allow your body to really get the benefits of any consistent routine. And you're eating healthy, but likely under eating from the fact that you're just like not really snacking all that much. You're trying to eat super healthy. This can definitely exacerbate metabolic downregulation, potentially deficiencies in certain key nutrients that can keep your metabolism from running the best that it could. So that's really where the guesser is seeing those faults come to life. And so it's not necessarily your fault. It's just you don't know any better, right? But the consequence to staying in this cycle, if you are the guesser, is number one, continued metabolic downregulation. Number two, potential nutrient deficiencies, low energy, low sex drive, low focus, low motivation, potentially leading into hormonal imbalances. But I think more than that, it's just going to lead to continued frustration and lower confidence and just losing hope and faith in the process and the possibility of success. Because if you continue rationalizing, well, I wanted to be here by the time I was 30 and I'm not, so maybe I'll just try to lose this much instead. We keep kind of downsizing our goals because we don't think it's possible, when really we just need a proven plan to get us there. And the solution for the guesser is very simple. It is having a focus on a proven path rather than just trying things. You can't be a try before you buy type of person. You have to find something and stick to it. And here's the kicker. It doesn't matter if it's the best. It doesn't. You just have to stick with it long enough. And long enough is longer than you're comfortable with. Much, much, much longer than you're comfortable with. And it's also the realization that non-specific efforts and a non-specific approach may have worked for you in the past, but more targeted efforts are needed to aid your metabolism now. So the keys for the guesser are to nourish rather than restrict for a healthier metabolism, to find specificity and consistency in your training to boost your metabolic rate, and you have to work smarter, not harder. So you don't need to add more stuff. You don't need to do more stuff. You just have to find the right approach. So it typically will feel like, if you're the guesser, it'll feel like you're playing darts in the dark, or you're walking around with a blindfold on, or you're throwing spaghetti at the wall and it's not sticking. So if that's you, take note, and we're going to move on to the next type here and see how many of these you might have overlap with or might not. So second type of metabolic downregulation is the weekend warrior. So signs that this is you is that you struggle the most with follow through. You're super up and down and you can't seem to stick to any efforts that you put in front of you. And you lack a confidence in yourself to stick with things. And you often wonder, what is wrong with me? Why can't I follow through? Why can't I stay consistent? And there's a lot of Friday night comes around, you've had a couple extra bites, a couple extra drinks, and you say, well, what's the point? And you kind of go off the rails, say, screw it. You may also struggle with episodes of overeating that are emotionally or stress driven, followed by lots of guilt and a tendency to try to cut back, skip meals, or restrict from that. And you're beating up on yourself mentally while you're doing that. And you typically feel like you're the problem, not the thing in front of you, not the plan, not the coach, not the protocol, whatever that you've downloaded online. And you constantly just feel behind, like you're just making up for past mistakes. And this makes you more tempted to try quick fixes and go all in, because if you could just find success once in one thing, then maybe you'll get out of this once and for all. But the cycle typically perpetuates itself. Now, what's really happening with the weekend warrior is that you've really just set the bar at a completely unrealistic ideal that you only really see on the highlight reel of social media, and it doesn't match your abilities or your actual needs. And so your metabolism has become very adaptive to these restrictive phases where you're pulling back, low calories. But every time you go over on your calories, every time you say screw it, that's when you're packing on that extra body fat. And so lowering your calories more is not the solve. And lastly, the stress mentally and physically on your body is very high. You're just really freaking your own body out here by being so mean to yourself, if I had to be honest, and not giving yourself the grace that you need to find a method that's sustainable for you. And I know this because this was me. This was my type when I was really going through it. I was 100% the weekend warrior. And anytime I have a slip up, I fall more into this category of there it is again, than any of the others. Now, if you stay in this cycle and you're the weekend warrior, some consequences you might see are really high amounts of weight gain, rapid weight gain from every overeating episode, and metabolic downregulation from the restricted, say, weekdays, like the Monday through Friday. And you might just feel like you start to become that person where it's I just smell a carb and I gain weight. That's what that is, right? Is you feel like it just sticks to you. You also probably will have a horrible relationship with food if you don't already. And it could take years of therapy to undo. And you also might continue to firm up that belief that you're the problem and that nothing can, quote unquote, fix you. And that is a very problematic place to be, because you are the solution to this problem, and you can get out of this, but you just need the right guidance and tools. And you might also experience digestive issues just from like the rapid influx and changes in intake. And just the weight gain is not going to be proportionate. It typically will pack on in like the lower stomach and the hips more so because of the rapid nature of overeating and undereating. So the solution for the weekend warrior is having more of a focus on, first and foremost, a healthy relationship with food, your body, and your internal dialogue. You got to learn to be kind to yourself. And you have to realize that setting the bar, quote unquote, lower is not a failure. It's actually more appropriate, and it's how you're going to build momentum to stay consistent and get to your goals faster. So the shifts here, the keys you need as the weekend warrior are go slow to go fast. So set the targets really realistically to the point where it feels like too little. And it's like slow is smooth is fast, like in CrossFit and sports. It's just like that. So when you're able to stick with the target over time, you're able to stay more consistent and you're going to see more progress in the long run because you're not stopping and starting and stopping and starting. And add to your diet rather than restrict. So we're probably going to need to raise our calories up on the day-to-day so we don't have those F-it moments on the weekend, and really just focusing on progress over perfection. So for the weekend warrior, it's really going to be like you if you feel like this journey is more so an emotional roller coaster than anything. And your weight probably a roller coaster too, but the emotional takes a really big toll. So that's number 2. Lastly, number 3 is our A player. This one is really interesting. So definitely if the other 2 didn't really hit with you so far, this one's going to be really pertinent. So the A player, signs that this is you. So number 1 would just be history. You've been at this game, weight loss, for a long time. You've been incredibly consistent for a long time. And you're like, what gives? My body is not responding to this. And you've done everything. You've done Optavia, keto, Noom, 1,200 calories. There's probably so many more. And you've gained the weight back at least 1 to 2 times after losing it. You're also going to notice that you have a really low appetite. So even if you wanted to eat more food, you feel like you can't. You're going to have lower energy and lower libido. And it's really just the amount of effort that you're putting in to the results that you're getting out ratio that's frustrating you because it's not for a lack of effort. And it's not for a lack of effort over a long enough period of time. It's years and years and years of putting in the work, and your body is super stagnant. So this is a really frustrating place to be. But here's what's really happening for the A player. And I say A player, I called it this because this person's doing all the things, right? But what's really happening here is we just have a more severe case of metabolic downregulation. Your body knows what's coming. And there's a high likelihood that we actually have micronutrient deficiencies and or hormonal imbalances that are contributing to keeping you stuck in this loop. And you really can't just let your foot off the gas all of a sudden because your body is primed to regain weight quickly, but you do need to change something, right? And your body's just under a lot of stress from the low calories, from the high stress, from fighting burnout for years, from the physical nutrition side, but also maybe the mental stress side. The A player is typically a go-getter in all areas of life, and this is just the one that's not clicking. So you probably have just a really high stress life as a whole. And so the A player, if you stay in this cycle, the real outcome of this, the real consequence of this is burnout. At some point, running on empty isn't going to be enough. The empty will run out and your body will crash. And that can lead to more issues with cortisol, hormonal imbalances, and honestly, a lot of stuff that I don't even want to mention or like allow anyone to get to. And it also can prime your body to regain even more weight the second you let off the gas, and your interior health can just deteriorate a lot. Like this can lead to, if not already, depending on your age, dysregulated cortisol, sex hormones, mood swings, low energy, autoimmune disorders, thyroid issues, gut issues, all of the above. I've seen it all. So the solution, if you are an A player, number one, you have to focus on stress reduction holistically rather than just finding the next plan for weight loss. Now, when I say stress reduction holistically, the A player typically rolls their eyes at me and says, I meditate, I journal, like I don't get it. Like I'm not stressed. Like this person does not feel stressed. They're a very high capacity individual. What I mean by stress reduction here is not necessarily just mental stress. It's the physical stressors that our body is under that don't necessarily equate to mental load. So, for example, being in a calorie deficit is stress on the body. Not having enough rest days from the gym is stress on the body. Having high inflammation is stress on the body. Not sleeping well enough is stress on the body, all those things, right? So stress reduction is very holistic. It's not just mindset, right? And then I think the last thing for the A player is just the realization that you have tried everything except breaking up with dieting to create the metabolic foundation that you really need for success. You've only tried the shortcuts. You've only tried the lose weight quick. You've only tried the cut calories and move more. You have to try building the foundation. And this is going to take time. So the key here is quality over quantity. You're going to want to focus on strength and central nervous system drive versus calorie burn. And you just have to play the long game. And when I say long, I mean long. And you're like, dude, I've been doing this for so long. I don't want to do it for that much longer, but I promise you this is a better alternative than what we're doing, right? We either stay in the same spot or we progress. So why not progress with the time passing anyways? So basically, the A player just feels like weight loss is a hamster wheel that they're getting nowhere. Or if you're like walking up a down escalator, like you're just getting nowhere, right? So really try to figure out and listen to this, take notes, figure out which one of these three you are. We have to make a change here, but the type of change matters. You have to change directions strategically with support and guidance. So if this really resonated with you, I'm going to have more episodes coming out soon that are going to explain the different strategies to solve each of these subtypes of metabolic downregulation for you. But if this really resonated with you and you just want that proven plan, you want someone to take care of this for you, with you, alongside you, and be able to walk you through every roadblock that might come up, go ahead and just send us a message, an email. I'll leave that stuff in the show notes and we can talk about one-on-one coaching. However, I really appreciate you just listening to this episode as a whole. If it resonated with you, I would love if you sent me a message on Instagram. I love chatting about this stuff and just knowing that it helps you feel seen and heard in your journey and motivated to take the next step. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I will hope to see you back here next week.